weekly holiday worth celebrating.
Hello there, Internet. We are back with Progress Day, and I am joined by ImpetuousPanda and the one and only Slimothy right here. Before, we introduce everybody and we talk a bit about what this is. For those of you who have been watching this 2-episode show so far, in case you guys are wondering, Merchant has been focusing on Magic the Gathering, which is his primary game, and been playing other games in general, and has not really found the time to completely focus on Runeterra. So we decided to incorporate a new member to the podcast who is definitely committed, to say the least. I'm very excited to introduce, a lot of you probably know him, as we share a good portion of our audience, and he's the one and only Slimothy, an excellent deck builder, and also an undying passion for just theory crafting and hair touching. Say hello, Swim.
Hello. Hey, guys. Good to be here.
Sweet. And we got, of course, Panda himself, the man who has saved my Twitch career multiple times at this point. Performing as, many things, but primarily the host to keep track of the podcast, make sure we don't ramble too much on individual topics. And yeah, a master of Deep himself. He made it to Masters this season with Nautilus, and also switched over to some Burn Degeneracy as well for a little experiment too. Say hello, Panda.
Hello, guys. Good to be here again, even though it's 2 months after the last episode, but we'll make it eventually.
No, but now from this point onwards, it's gonna be a regular thing.
We have a planner. Yeah. We have
we have an Excel. We have an Excel.
It's true. I've
every
seen
2
it.
weeks.
So it's gonna be a bi-weekly thing. The next episode we'll be talking about the upcoming balance patch, which I believe will be May 26th, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, without further ado, we're going to start off by just talking about the first subject, which is, pretty general. General thoughts on the new expansion and the addition of Bilgewater to the game, Rising Tides, all that good stuff. So, whoever wants to start things off, then feel free.
No, go ahead.
My general sentiment, I think, is probably one of the more common, at least among the more dedicated players, which I'm sure some of you guys might feel at least very similarly, which is that I love the content. I love the new decks. There's a lot of cool new stuff. I love a lot of Bilgewater as a whole. My one little thing would be little balance issues right now, which I'm sure, for example, we're going to talk about Burn a little bit later, and maybe a little bit something Grizzled Ranger a little bit. There's a couple of cards that feel just a little tuned out, but apart from that, I really love the expansion. It's great.
I think it's very, I think we can all agree it's pretty much impossible to release a new expansion and have no problematic cards come along with it. It's a card game. It's incredibly difficult to balance out beforehand, especially after you unleash the gates and let all the player base play around with the cards, right? But I think overall they've done a tremendous job with this expansion. It really did exceed my expectations, and that's not something that I say lightly. I expected some really interesting stuff, but it really blew me away. Champions like Twisted Fate, which has become my personal favorite, is just an absolute blast to play. There's so many different cool archetypes that also, like I said, are very different, right? You have Nautilus deep sea monsters for the Timmies of the world. They love to play these huge sea monster creatures, and it's actually a very viable, strong deck. But then you got some really cool spell combo archetypes. If you're more of a simple vanilla guy, you still got your Demacia Bannerman with more powerful tools added to its core, and just playstyles differ quite tremendously. And overall, I've just been having a blast playing a new deck every day. Basically, it's great.
I think the coolest thing as well was that when they added Bilgewater, they added a faction or a region that doesn't really step on anything else in terms of what they want to do. There's new keywords, there's new ways of playing, and then you kind of always see Demacia as just big units, and Ionia as spells or elusives, but Bilgewater managed to add a new expansion to the game without having kind of stepping over on a different identity that already exists in the game, kind of. It added Plunder, it added Deep as well. They're completely new mechanics that I think have their own identity, which I think was really cool as well. I don't know in the future with more regions how, as they get added, I think things will get a bit repetitive in a way, but with Bilgewater, it's completely fresh, and the new mechanics make it seem like a completely new thing altogether. I think it's really cool.
That's a really good point. I kind of didn't really think too much about that, but yeah, you're right. They actually cause almost no overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And also thematically, I think it's also really cool. Like the whole, deep theme and sea monsters and kind of like green and magic, for example, like the same vibe, I guess, with really really big creatures and the pirates as well with Gangplank and the barrel stuff. I think it's just
I
really cool
love.
overall.
I think the powder keg is probably probably my favorite mechanic from Bilgewater. I love the synergy with area of effect, damage based resources, and I love popping kegs, man. It's super satisfying. It's pretty skill intensive as well. You have to be patient. You have to build up to have multiple plays to react to your opponent interacting with the kegs. Like that's because that's one of the things, right? The kegs are highly disruptible, and I really like that mechanic for sure. Even though Twisted Fate is my favorite champion, which he does work really well with kegs, right? I really like that mechanic, and adding onto like Bilgewater, I also really like how other regions got new tools incorporated, and it's not like they're. I mean, obviously you have Demacia as an example, which the Bannerman just got kind of like better, right? But when we look at Ionia, no new elusives, no real elusive support. We just got more tools for the region, and now Ionia is more diverse than it was before, in my opinion. Especially with the introduction of champions like Lee Sin, and then some great card draw tools and great early game help for control decks and Eye of the Dragon. It's nice to see them reinforce these regions with different play styles, and it expands the deck building possibilities. And I just really like the expansion as a whole in that regard.
Yeah, for sure. I really like what you said about the kegs. Like, there's a pattern in the new expansion, which is that they've added a ton of these kind of sort of skill shot cards or cards that are very timing dependent.
Yeah.
Like they can either be counters or they can be very counterable depending on when you're willing to use them. Like before, all we had was Glimpse, right? Glimpse Beyond, which is a card, if you use it proactively, it'll get countered. You have to use it when the opponent's out of mana or when they go in for something. It's a really cool dynamic. And now they've added Retreat in Ionia, Noxian Fervor in Noxus, and the keg mechanic, which all kind of pile on that. And I really love that dynamic.
Noxian Fervor is definitely a card that we're going to talk about a lot as we move on later. But it's like I like that you point out, because I think there's a general misconception. I've seen people who criticize Burn really hate the card, but I think it's one of the best cards added to Noxus. I love Noxian Fervor's design because it's just highly interactive. It's a symmetrical effect. It's very disruptible, but it can also be used to disrupt removal as well. And I really like that card. And yeah, it's definitely, the game is definitely way more interactive than it was before. I mean, that's the thing about core sets, right? They tend to be very vanilla, and at a certain point, the game could become a bit vanilla. But now we're really seeing the true potential of the core mechanics of Runeterra, and I'm really excited for what's to come. Like, I'm already really excited for the next expansion and what they can introduce and how they can make it even more interesting. So yeah, just great job in general. Great first impressions for sure, and I've been having a tremendous amount of fun this expansion.
Now, with new cards being added in every region, and also the new expansion itself, some cards have been a bit problematic. Some archetypes have been a bit problematic. Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts on maybe some of the cards you guys think might get nerfed come the balance patch 2 weeks from now? Or overall just archetypes or playstyles that are maybe, not healthy for the game on ladder, for example, with Burn being kind of the biggest protagonist the past few weeks. Any thoughts in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance they'll touch Burn in some way. It's hard to say exactly what, and Grizzled Ranger in particular is a card that a lot of people have a bit of a problem with. And then honestly, perhaps something in Ionia. It actually does feel like, as much I do agree with you very much, Mogwai. It's like I like that they're getting a lot of cool new tools and ways to play, but it feels kind of like they got the most out of of all the regions.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Feeling maybe a little too good right now.
Yeah. Like meditation.
I will say, yeah. Oh God. Oh Jesus. I will say I really I like how you phrase that, Panda, with kind of the unhealthy for meta, because Burn actually didn't have that high of a win rate this last week, and we might talk about win rates later. Yeah. But I do feel like Burn is unhealthy just simply because it kind of forces the meta into a specific direction. You have to play kind of a somewhat narrow subtype of deck to be able to win against it, and it also creates a bit more rock paper scissors.
I think it's definitely like what you point out there is really important. I really want to talk about this because I think this is a very important subject for especially newer players. It's a mistake even intermediate level players when they make about like when they look at a metagame and they start to like, you know, diagnose it, right? Like and think, okay, so because a lot of people make the mistake of purely focusing on win rates. And I know you touch this subject a lot, so I'm like win rate is not like by no means is it the most relevant. Like it does not stand on its own. It's not a good reference for whether a deck is good or bad for the game. And just so newer players can understand this very clearly, when you look at a win rate purely from a deck like Noxus Piltover Burn, for example, in Masters rank or even in Platinum and Diamond, you're not gonna get, you know, a crazy percentage, right? Because there are a lot of people adapting to the deck, and there are a lot of people hard countering the deck. But what's important to note, and the reason why Burn is the most problematic archetype in the game right now, is because right now there is a limited amount of healing available across all regions. Specifically, it's almost all packed in one region, and that is Shadow Isles. Demacia does have access to Radiant Guardian. Ionia does have access to the Eye of the Dragon and Health Potion, although those resources are less reliable in general. And barring that, you know, you look at Freljord, Noxus, Piltover, and Zaun, Bilgewater, they got nothing. They pretty much got nothing. I mean, they have like Courier, the orange guy. Keeper. Yeah, Tribe Keeper, exactly. Like very relevant, examples, right? So even though there are ways to counter Burn, it is a counterable deck. There are very limited ways to do so, and it really oppresses many potential region combinations in the game. Can we get some Fs in the comments for Freljord? As you know, it's tough, and it's important to look at it that way. Like win rate is not everything; it's what that deck is doing, how it's affecting the environment, and that's you know, it's a very important way to look at it, right? And a lot of people can miss the mark in that regard.
It's also, I mean, aggro isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like that people are playing aggro and that aggro exists. It's not like it's this like cancerous plague on the card games that developers don't know how to fix. There has to be aggro in the game because it's not. Heimer is and Karma are value machines that if you don't have something to keep it in check in terms of, you know, a certain portion of the decks being played are direct counters, or at least, you know, make the win rate a lot worse for Heimer and Karma. Everyone would be playing Karma and Heimer and Ezreal decks, and that way they would have a much higher win rate than Burn would ever get as well. So it's a delicate balance, and it's just about one, trying to make matchups not as binary, because that's the worst thing with Burn. When you play, I played 100 games 2 days ago, and just to test stuff out and kind of see how the meta was right now. And like you said, I mean, if you're playing Shadow Isles, you're almost instantly going to lose to that. And if you queue into something more control based, like Karma Lux, something like that, you're almost instantly going to win. So it's terrible, you know, with the player's skill. Even if he's a skill player, he has, you know, let's say he's better than his opponent, let's say, okay? And you queue into a matchup, and then the moment you queue in, you see who you're facing, you see what your hand is. Your skill doesn't matter. Like the game's going to play itself, and you're going to win or lose. And that's something you don't want in card games generally, just binary matchups. So that's the biggest problem, really. Not that aggro exists, and not that it's played a lot, but more binary matchups. I think that's the worst part about it.
I want to make a quick distinction. Like I don't like labeling the Noxus Piltover deck as an aggro deck. It is an aggro deck, like don't get me wrong, but I prefer just labeling it as Burn, because unlike other aggro builds, I have no issue with a deck punishing me for not playing the first few turns and developing a 1-drop into a 2-drop into more 1-drops and just overwhelming me and out-tempoing me and just not letting me get my strategy going. That is good for the game, even though some people can find it frustrating. That is, like Panda said, very necessary. My big issue, and one of the reasons why Burn is the main reason why Burn is not in a healthy state right now, is because it is so efficient at dealing direct damage, because there are so many different resources that deal direct damage that it doesn't necessarily need to even connect with a unit onto the Nexus directly to take your health total down to 0. And that is because of cards like Boom Crew Rookie, and because, like I said, of all the direct damage spells. So that's, like, I think it's important to make the distinction between aggro and Burn, because I think aggro is always, like, and you know, I think we can all agree, like, aggro has never been in a really strong state in Runeterra because of the nature of the game, because you're alternating between rounds and you're attacking. So it's hard to, like, because every every creature inherently has like taunt, right? If you compare it to other card games, but burn being as efficient as it is right now, I don't think anybody can appreciate a deck that just can kill you without having to actually, win the board state or anything like that, right?
Yeah, you're never really safe. You can't really stabilize against them.
Yeah.
Like,
another issue is not only the fact that the deck is, has a lot of burn, whatever, but the fact that it's so easy to craft because it has no champions. So any new players like, okay, I guess I'm playing burn. It's easy to play, so even falls into that category even more of a new player be like, okay, guess it's time to play burn. And there was one more point I want to say. But those are the two basic points. I mean, it's the play rate also jumps up because not just because it's good, but because it's easy to play in general, and it's easy to craft because there's barely any. I mean, epics. I think I don't know what units are epics. I think maybe none. There's no champions in the maybe optimal list right now as well. So that just adds to the problem even more. And it's been something that happens in every card game. And also the game length. That was the third thing. So it's just very fast game. So if you're laddering, it's the the easy decision. Just play burn, play 100 games really quick, like I did in like 24 hours maybe, and you can rank up very easily even if you have a lower win rate and there's less chance for skill expression.
I think I want to comment on what you said, Panda, because we actually did just get all the mobiletic stats coming in, and I think I love stats. There's a lot to look at. So I'm just gonna talk about. I'm gonna just mention the top 3 most played decks at all ranks of ladder with games played. So number 3 is Bannerman with 28,000 games played in all ladder. Not even just ranked. Number 2 is Elise Control PNZSI with Karina at 56,000 games played. And number 1 is Burn with a 113,000 games played. Like, absolutely ridiculous, absolutely insane amount of games played. This is in the last week, by the way. This stats is 7 days tracking. So yes, it's a very, very cheap deck. Everyone's playing it. It's its numbers are quite insane.
All right,
Yeah,
so just 1 second. I had to. I didn't know I had to go premium with Zoom because our call was about to get shut down. It said you have 5 minutes left. I'm like, what? So okay, I fixed it. We got unlimited time now. Pay to win. There we go. All right, sir.
The thing as well as the expansion just launching, or the game rather just launching and leaving closed beta and actually launching, having marketing going along with it, having a big push for people to start playing the game, mobile launch as well, means that a ton of new players have no cards. Even though Runeterra is very generous, it's true. You do have to put in some time, you have to put in some effort, and play daily and all this. And as soon as they start playing, I mean, there's a big commitment if you're deciding to craft something that might get nerfed, or deciding to craft something that might be expensive, that has 3 Ledros and 3 Karina and champions and stuff. So that's another reason why burn is just so. It's a safe option. You craft that, you can ladder with it, and then once you start seeing what gets nerfed, what's good, what's bad, then you can craft your, let's say, final deck to actually climb and enjoy the game. Let's say
that's so accurate. Like one of the decks that my viewers have asked me about the most, and one of the decks that has done the best for me on YouTube is the championless Undying list that I built. And it's just because people don't have to invest in champions, especially like there's a thing about champions in Legends of Runeterra that I've seen even posts on Reddit about people saying that they prefer opening champions in the vault than getting a champion wildcard because they just don't know what champion to craft, and it's just like this pressure that they feel, because so they prefer just the game, taking that decision away from them and just giving them. Like it's completely relatable, and it's super understandable that people gravitate towards. If there's a good championless deck, then it's just like the first. They may not even think eventually I'll move into something that I like more, but at least now that I'm starting to play, I'm gonna dive in on this, and it makes complete sense.
Yeah, it runs no epics as well. It's like an actual budget deck that just happens.
Well,
to be...
1 second. You're sounding like Slotbot right now. Is your maybe like unplugged?
Step 1, voice.
I love Slotbot's voice lines, by the way. Oh yeah. All right, so just let he's working on it. All right, so Yeah.
The good news though for people that hate aggro, one card like for example Boomku Rookie, I think there's no chance it doesn't get nerfed.
Yeah.
I think it's late already. I think
Yeah.
anyone that looks at the card knows right away there's something wrong with it. You know, has to go down to 3 health, I think.
Yeah.
But the other good news is that as time goes on, and the big influx of new players from launch starts, you know, generating more wild cards, starts playing more, starts getting more rewards, I think, you know, you can look at the numbers and you'll see burn with maybe a possible nerf here or there, and that, you know, extra time, you know, after 2-3 weeks, I think naturally the play rate of burn will go down, so that it is good news. And I think it's like this with a lot of card games. I mean, it makes sense. New season, aggro, people try and climb the ladder very quickly, and then they you know, as time goes on, they move on to more complicated decks or slower decks and try and enjoy what they enjoy the most, really, not what they think is best or fastest.
I think if Boomku Rookie were to be nerfed to a 1/3, we would definitely see a spike in like 2-mana 3/2s running around in decks, because it's so important to trade into that and knock it out in one hit. Like the problem, like Boomku Rookie getting 2 attacks in is extremely effective for the burn deck. Like, it's very rare that you're able to prevent that as well. That early on in the game, you just like, it's super hard to generate anything like 4 damage onto one unit. And it's also like the thing about the Boomku Rookie is because of its low attack power, you don't feel good blocking into it, right? Because you're taking damage from other stronger 1-drops or 2-drops. So I'd agree. I definitely do think that's one of the, if not the biggest candidate for a potential nerf incoming. And I think we would all very much like to see that. My opinion towards Boomku Rookie, like, we spoke about this in like the past podcast, actually. I thought it was like a very clearly overpowered, but it was in a vacuum. It was fine. Like, and in that, you know, vanilla core set, it was fine due to aggro not being as powerful. But now with all the direct damage introduced in the game, it's gotten on the hand, and it's one of the prime reasons that deck is so consistent. Like, when they play Boomku Rookie on turn 2, you're feeling pretty bad.
Even if you don't see more 3/2s or you know, 3 attack units on turn 2, even a 2 attack unit pinging it down to 1, there's so many 1 cost removal. I guess a lot of it is like Shadow Owls, Ball of Feast, for example, but Withering Whale as well. I mean, it makes it a lot easier. 4 health at turn 2 is just extremely hard to deal with. It's very, very difficult. But 3 health, even with a 2 damage ping, it's kind of fine.
All right, testing.
Well, you're not robotic, but you're completely new.
Yeah, you went from robot to mime. All right.
It's step 3.
But yeah,
aside from burn, I think a few other cards that we haven't talked about yet. I think Ranger's Resolve might be an issue. I think the value you can get on a 1, even if it is, you know, it only gives completely. Top, it doesn't grant it. I think the power creep from Chain Vest to Ranger Resolve is immense. And also, like we mentioned before in the other episode of the podcast, but overall in Runeterra, 1 damage in the first 3 turns is so massive.
Yeah, massive.
And being able to save your entire board on a trade, it's just a feels bad moment, and you just lose the game almost turn 3 or 4 against something like the mouse if you're playing for board.
We've seen high impact 1-drop spells in the core set. You know, there's stuff like Rummage, Ghost, which is not super played, but it's still a very, very impactful play for 1 mana, amongst others. But there's been nothing like Ranger's Resolve. Like, the amount of value that a 1 mana burst speed spell can generate, I just think that card is unrivaled regarding that potential. And definitely, I would expect it to be a high candidate for a nerf. I think the card would still be very playable at 2 mana, personally. All right, test number 3. Wait, am I? Maybe. All right, we'll be right back after this technical difficulty is solved. Gabby's gonna love editing this. Be right back. All right, so we're back. You know, turns out his mic wasn't plugged.
Well, hey, Well, hey, man, I plugged it back in. It's working great now.
Professional YouTuber. All right, so I think we hop on to the next subject now, right? We talked enough. I think we covered. We talked about the burn. the situation about Burn. We talked about Demacia. I mean, any other cards? I mean, it's Swim. We could elaborate a little bit on Ionia, because I think we didn't go deep into that, right, earlier? You had a few things to say about the tools there. We can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly, I want to say mostly deep meditation, but even a little bit Eye of the Dragon. Eye of the Dragon in particular is just kind of like does a really, really, really efficient job at doing one thing Ionia just couldn't do.
Yeah.
Ionia's kind of always been like a sort of like late game region that has problems getting to the late game, and you need to supplement that, but it's just got like an early game tool that you can't even run in every Ionia deck, but when you can, it's really powerful. But yeah, it's like 80% deep meditation.
What do you... So deep meditation, I think we can all just agree maybe like a bump in cost could just fix that. But Eye of the Dragon is particularly very interesting to me because I'm not gonna lie, I'm not exactly sure how I would tweak it. Like my initial idea would be to make her a 1/2. What do you think about that?
Yeah, maybe. I think that, I mean, she's pretty good. Depending on like the state of the meta, it's arguable she doesn't need a nerf. It's just, it kind of comes down to what the meta threats are.
Yeah.
But the fact that she's a 1 mana, because she's a tune, so she's basically a 1 mana card, and she has 3 health, and she's kind of a must remove, is something that is unprecedented. We haven't seen it before. Because normally it's like when you play Warshafts or Starlit Seer or Elise, you know, those are big threats that force like a 3 mana removal. You thermo that, it doesn't feel good. You're trading 1 mana down, but you still have to. You have to kill it. But this is 1 mana. Yeah. It's a little crazy. So yeah, I mean, 2 health is a pretty good fix.
Yeah,
if a change is warranted.
Like I do believe it'll be though, especially like I think she'll be one of the. I think she's gonna be one of the most efficient cards after a potential nerf to Burn. I think if aggro is weakened, we are definitely like going to see Eyes of the Dragon become problematic. She's going to be really effective at empowering Ionia control archetypes. And not even control archetypes, just spell combo archetypes as well. So I do think... I think to prevent... for some damage control, it would be wise to perhaps tone her down. Yeah.
And as well, I think the whole plunder... Well, not plunder, but the card stealing Lepto package.
Yeah.
I think it's necessarily not strong, but because it draws from the top, it really fucks over Freljord even more than it's already. Like it's already fucked. Like it's already like crippled on the floor, and then Piltover comes around and just steps on it as well. So I think that might be a problem going forward. They might have to change that to draw from the bottom, or to. I think it just counters Freljord too much. And also, I think personally, Bilgewater isn't a very strong region. I think it's maybe middle-ish, or even lower than that.
I'd say high mid. It's a good region.
I'd say low mid. They're probably
like
they're fifth out of 7.
Really, that low?
Yeah. They're pretty decent, but.
And because of this, I think Pilfered Goods isn't a problem. But that's a card that if it wasn't in a good region, or like a region that had overall better cards, and I think it might be problematic. I mean, draw 2 mana with a fairly easy activator and plunder. Because Bilgewater isn't strong, I don't think it's a problem now. I think it's a card that's strong, and it's, you know, somewhat fair, although it does feel bad to play if someone steals some cards and then like important win con and stuff. Not always a great thing in card games. But in the future, that card, I think the value is really, really high for 2 mana for what it does, and it might be a problem going forward.
Yeah, that's the thing to understand about like a lot of these kind of like suggestions, is that a lot of them are very future dependent. Like with Eye of the Dragon, I personally think it'll actually probably be fine if they just tune deep meditation. I will probably be in a good spot at that point. Yeah. But then, you know, on top of that, in the future, eventually it'll be a problem again. And it's exactly like kind of saying with some of these Bilgewater cards is like, in the future, there will be things to look at. Absolutely. That's to be preemptive.
All right, so I think we started a discussion that, you know, it's a good segue to like the next subject, right? Which is pretty interesting. Unless I'm looking at it wrong, we're talking about like the power level of the regions, or am I messing this up? Yeah. Okay. No, we are.
It was a natural transition, Mogwai, but you fucked it up.
I'll just edit it out, so I look smart. God damn it. All right, so we're going to be ranking the different power levels following the introduction of Bilgewater. This is an interesting subject because I think it's a bit generic, because you can tackle at it like in different ways, right? Because it's hard to rank regions. Like you can rank them individually, but I think that's just you're missing the big picture, because it's also about how those regions, first of all, how flexible they are, how good they are at mixing with other regions, how prevalent they are when mixing with others. There's a lot of factors, right? But if I were to say personally, I think it's easy to say that Demacia is definitely up there. It's just highly effective. See, this is why it's a bit weird though, because I don't feel comfortable like ranking Noxus really high, because it has. I don't think it's. I would actually consider Noxus one of the weakest regions, even though it is represented in arguably the strongest deck in the metagame. It's just kind of like a one-trick pony, like super one-trick. Not even like the Demacia levels of one-trick. Like it's just like just
one deck.
Yeah, just one deck. Like everything else about it. So I definitely think Demacia is more of a powerhouse. Ionia is definitely very much up there as well. Shadow Isles too. I think those three would definitely be top three for me. And I think I may be ranking Bilgewater a little bit higher than both of you guys. I think there's a lot of very strong archetypes that stem from the region. I think Nautilus Sea Monsters is in a great spot right now. I believe Powder Keg Control, despite some bad matchups here and there, is also a really, really solid list. And there's just a lot of, it's also where my heart belongs right now, because there's some amazing, some super fun archetypes, and they're all pretty strong and viable in themselves, right? Well, they're not just as straight effective directly like some of the ones that I mentioned prior. I still do think Bilgewater, I would rank it like 4 or 5, something like that. Well, I mean, Piltover is also up there too, but definitely the last one I would rank personally is, I think we may agree on this, is poor Freljord.
Yeah.
Winter is not coming. Definitely not around now, at least. We're in summer, so it really sucks for Freljord. And yeah, there's several reasons as to why that is the case, but yeah, you guys can give your input on this and the way you see it.
Well, for my power rankings, and I mean, you touched on it very well. It's like the biggest subjectivity in power rankings is how you weigh different factors, like versatility versus power. That's where most of it's going to come from. But I would go Ionia, then PNZ, then Demacia, then Shadow Isles, then Bilgewater, then Noxus, then Freljord.
Yeah,
PNZ is actually almost first place, just because they hit so many powerful decks right now.
Yeah.
And Vi is nuts.
That's true. That's true. I may have. Yeah, I think ranking Shadow Isles. I mean, the reason why I rank Shadow Isles so high right now is because of how good it is in this particular meta. But maybe I was a little bit blindsided by that, because Piltover is a powerhouse. Like they have, like, not only Vi, they have Heimer and Ezreal as well, and they have a lot of really neat tools for sure.
Yeah, I agree with Swim putting Ionia up first. I think just overall the things they can accomplish and the champions they have and the decks they have, it's just, for me personally, I've always thought any Heimer deck is going to be problematic, and Karma deck is going to be problematic in the future. I also don't enjoy playing, super drawn out control games, so that's also part of it. Yeah. Whereas I play against it a lot, and I'm like, hey, this deck, I hate it. But I think Ionia is probably the strongest. PNZ as well. I think it's very versatile, like Swim said. My first would be for sure Ionia, and then PNZ, Demacia, and Shadow Isles, second to fourth. I think Demacia is very good, but it's good at only doing one thing. Really sure Lux does add a different element but the whole spell stuff in Demacia, I mean, Lux is good, but everything else is but it's not as versatile. I think it's more one-dimensional. Whereas Shadow Isles is super versatile. You can splash in many different decks, and the healing package overall is always going to be, I don't know if there's going to be rotations in Runeterra, but if there isn't, I mean, Withering Wail, Grasping Undying, Vile Feast are always going to be cards that are being played in top decks for the rest of eternity, because they add something very unique and something very necessary in some metas like the one we're playing in right now. So those four, I think for sure, are the top four. It's not even close. There's a big gap after them.
Yeah.
And then Bilgewater. Maybe Noxus in front, actually. And then Bilgewater. And then, Freljord is even lower down. I think it has some problems now. And Piltover Goods is part of that equation. I think with Bilgewater being a new expansion, people wanting to play it more. I've run into a lot of Bilgewater on ladder, even though I don't think it's necessarily a good region, or there aren't any necessary top decks. I think Twisted Fate and Gangplank are not, in my opinion, and what I've been playing and what I've been playing against, not top decks. So I'm always happy to see them, but there is a higher play rate because they are new champions and it's a new region, and that's affecting Freljord even more, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Demacia does kind of share the traits of Noxus a little bit, though, even though like much less so. But it is kind of like a one-trick pony as well, right? I just do think it's such a it's the power mid-range list right now, right? And I think that's a very strong, title to have. And I do believe Lux is very underrated personally. I think Lux is still really, really good, but she's just very underplayed. That's why I rank it so high. I definitely do agree with you guys on Piltover, though. I think Shadow Owl is like, to have that be your identity, to be the healing region, is one of, if not the best identity to have, really, especially in a game where your life total is 20. Like, you're always going to find a good reason to run Shadow Owls in this game. And it's always been such a versatile region, man. Like, even in its stages in which it was a little bit overpowered, it's just, there's so many decks you could build with it. There's so many different strategies. I love the self-sacrifice, aristocrat sort of archetype that it can provide you with. A lot of people love to play spiders. It's also very intuitive and a good, powerful, swarmy deck to play. And it mixes so well with so many different... Like, that's one of the things about Shadow Owls. It mixes really well. Like, I can mix Shadow Owls with pretty much every region. And that's also, like, I think it's the most flexible in that regard. I could be wrong, but I do believe Shadow Owls is the easiest region to mix with others. And that's super, super relevant. I don't know. I still think you guys are not giving Bilgewater enough credit, but maybe I am biased. Who knows? Like,
it's just hard to compete with the top four. That's all. It's it's not bad, but those four are just powerhouses. They hit everything.
Yeah. I can't disagree with that. My heart wants to, but I can't.
The healing in Shadow Owls is not only healing, but it's draining. So it's also removal, which is the biggest thing as well. Shadow Owls adds. You have so much removal. That's also PNZ is very strong with Thermal Beam and people. No one ever complains about Thermal Beam, but I think it's a very strong card in general for removal. Especially having like turn 1 option, turn 2.
You're more happy to see it in the early game generally, but a lot of times, like, I find myself playing any sort of deck with like a relevant 5-drop or 6-drop. It's always like, I hope they don't have Thermal Beam. So it's definitely very relevant for sure.
And removal is always going to be a big part of card games as well.
I think the thing about Ionia that makes it so strong, and to a degree this would apply to PNZ as well, is kind of what Mogwai was saying earlier about Shadow Isles, which is that they have concepts that simply have no substitutes in other regions. Most importantly, Ionia has access to Will of Ionia and Deny, which are two cards that there's just simply no substitute for. And
especially Will.
Meditation now.
Will is
Will is crazy.
Will is probably one of the best cards in the game right now.
It's hard to agree.
It's insane.
Absolutely. Like whereas Deny is kind of like more talked about. But Will is definitely the stronger and more impactful of the two. But yeah, that's why Ionia, like when you look at like tournaments and stuff, like most people just ban Ionia for that reason. And then PNZ has kind of the same thing with like just the super premium like forms of removal that they have. I mean, Demacia has like big bodies, but every region has access to some just like high value stat lines.
And also Will works very well with what Ionia wants to do, and with Heimer, for example. I mean, it becomes a tempo game near the end game. I've been playing a lot of Deep, for example, and when you play against Ionia and against Will, it feels really, really bad.
That's what's holding it back.
Always.
That's
the fact that Heimer can not only slow you down and make you play Nautilus 7 times in a game so it finally sticks, but also it's generating tempo in terms of turrets while you're trying to get any presence on the board, so it feels really, really bad. I think Heimer's also, I mean, I've said it from the beginning, it's also problematic. I think
you're not a fan. You're not a fan of the little rodent.
No, not at all. I think it's having such a high value possibility from both Heimer and Karma. I think it's problematic. I think it's fine to play control decks, and it's fine to have these drawn out games, and it's fine, but I think it generates just too much value. Karma at Enlightened is just insane, and also the fact you can shuffle Karma back in, so it has very few weak. I don't know. Overall, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how it should be tuned in what ways, but I think it's just not a fun thing to have in the game. The same way that Burn is problematic. I think at the top end, Karma, Ezreal to some extent, to the fact that you can kill on burst.
That's what I wanted to tackle on. Like I think people really like when it comes to complaining about late game, champions. I think people hit them like miss the mark so hard when they complain about Ezreal. It's like I think Heimerdinger and Karma are on another level of problematic. I think Ezreal. I mean, Swim here plays a lot of Ezreal, so he knows this very well.
Whoa, I haven't in a while.
Yeah, that's true. But you played a lot of it, especially with the core set. Yeah. I saw you playing Ezreal a lot, and it can be pretty brutal, but people don't realize that a lot of the highly toxic moments with Ezreal were just contributed to thanks to Karma, and I do believe Heimerdinger and Karma, especially Karma. I really dislike Karma personally, are the more problematic late game champions as we move on, especially as we get more and more cards. Those two, especially Karma. Karma is a big no-no for me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I couldn't agree more about Ezreal in particular, which is that like I can say right now the reason, a really large part of the reason why Ezreal was so popular is because in set 1 it was kind of the only way to play combo, and now in set 2 like most of the decks they've added are combo decks. So like a lot of combo players like me, like almost all of them are like, wow, there's a ton of shit to do. We don't have to just be Ezreal players anymore. And that's been my experience, and that's been a lot of people's experience. So definitely not like a huge issue there.
I think Ezreal we've discussed it before on the last episode of this podcast. Ezreal was already annoying to play against and problematic and all this. And we said in the future, if certain cards got added, it would become a bigger problem. I think it's not being played as much right now. Decks like Karma Ezreal, for example. But having Deep Meditation be burst is also a huge buff to Ezreal. And I've been seeing, tournaments where games are being decided turn 10. Opponent has 20 HP, completely healthy. Ezreal comes down, Karma's on the board already, and then
if Ezreal and Karma are on the board, it's over anyways.
No response from the opponent, no possibility. Just everything burst. Insight, mushrooms, whatever.
I mean,
random burst spells from Insight.
Deep Meditation with Karma and Ezreal on the board is just like that's just insane. That's actually insane. I get, but it's more of like, again, it's Karma, man. It's Karma.
That's also true. But overall, I think as more burst cards get added, it's going to become more and more of a problem where you can build a deck that just has a very large pool of burst cards, and you can just dodge interaction completely.
I saw like a very
20 HP.
What would you guys, if that becomes a problem, what would you guys think about? Like, I saw somebody mention a while back, like a pretty interesting like solution to making it so that burst spells deal 1 damage and fast spells 2 and slow spells 3. What would you guys think about that? Like if it becomes a problem, it's I'm not sure about it, but I think it's interesting. Like
I think it's probably like a little more complicated than they're gonna want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think if it was a purely competitive game, it would make things more balanced. But because you're also having to make things intuitive and easy to understand, you're not only catering to like the very top end players. It'll be weird to have a card that would talk about like the meta, talk about like fast, slow. I don't know, kind of weird. Like the text would be kind of weird.
I agree.
The one thing is that, and I know slippery slope as a phrase is like a full meme, but when you do start like designing cards to be more complex, you do eventually end up with like Yu-Gi-Oh cards where it is actual like an essay. It's like
I came back to that game.
Slippery slope.
Dude, I played so much Yu-Gi-Oh when I was like 15. I came back like 10 years later. I could not understand anything. Like they were like novels in the cards. It's just like people were winning on turn 1, because everything was just like doing so much. I could totally see that.
One thing just to kind of connect everything we were saying earlier, because Panda was talking about first Burn being kind of like problematic, and then Heimerdinger being problematic. I would say the biggest kind of like way to sort of lump everything together is to say that like overly polarizing concepts aren't great. So that can manifest in a few different ways. For example, Burn creates polarizing matchups, which are kind of like 0 or 100 kind of situations. Whereas Heimerdinger creates polarizing situations, which is that if he dies right away, he's almost useless. Whereas if you can't kill him in a turn and a half, he wins the game, period, right? And this can also be seen in other concepts, such as like some of like the rally or scout mechanics, which are either literally useless or the strongest things possible. Yeah. And I do agree that like overall, there's some of these overly polarizing mechanics that can definitely be unhealthy. Some people would say standalone, although I think that one might skirt the border. What do you guys think about standalone?
I despise it. I think, especially like, because it's also important to consider not only the, more experienced player and their point of view, but also the experience of a newer player onto the game. And I think few things feel as bad as running into someone who just drops Zed on turn 3 and gives the standalone, and you just automatically lose to that. Which is why I think Unyielding Spirit is a highly problematic card, because I think it ruins the new player's experience quite a bit, and I don't think it can stay in its current form because of that. It's important to acknowledge these, right? Like it's not like this is not just a game for, card boy just fanatics like us. Right. Like it's also people who just want to casually play on the phone, and they don't want to just get like super frustrated with these binary, just unhealthy mechanics. Like cheese. Like I just see standalone as just cheese. Is what it is, and I'm not a fan of it.
No, you're right. And the thing is, you can't really even like, it's hard to talk about that kind of thing like on YouTube or on stream, because there's a notable amount of people that will just hear it as, oh God, Mogwai is so bad. He's complaining about Unyielding Spirit. I see that shit. It's like, it's crazy. It's like, it's hard to have real discussions. Sorry, what were you going to say, Panda?
I think standalone, just the fact that it grants +3/+3 was such a small downside. I mean, it's not like this is a huge thing you have to set up. You're literally just not playing cards on turn 1 and 2 and you're good to go. I think it's granting way too much stats and at burst speed as well. Obviously, most buffs are burst speed, so it makes sense in terms of how the game's balanced. But +3/+3 for 3 mana seems like a bit too much to me. It's always seemed like a bit too much. And also Unyielding Spirit, I think at burst speed is not great.
Suspect.
I'm not gonna say it's OP, because you play against Ionia, you get hard counter, like you waste 8 mana for nothing. It has counters, but it is one of those binary things where some decks cannot do anything about it. So then they just, okay, time to die. And some decks can deal with it very easily, so it gets countered immediately. So it's binary, and it has being burst as well is it doesn't feel great because there's no interaction. Of course, it's a very expensive spell. And it is, like we said, a binary spell. So if you make it fast and reduce it to like 7 mana, for example, it also won't feel great because it can get countered super easily, because you can just kill a unit with so many things at 7 mana. But yeah, I think it's problematic for sure. Not necessarily strong, but definitely doesn't feel great to have that in the game.
This may seem sorry. Like, I was just gonna say real quick. I was just gonna say like this may like I don't want to like segue into this topic that I'm going to mention like real quick, but just to point it out, I think this is one of the reasons why I personally think that Riptide is very much worth running in Nautilus, because it could become just stronger than Will of Ionia, if you drop Nautilus on the board, and being able to disrupt even things like these, like being able to deal with anything in a game that can otherwise lead to binary scenarios like this is a very strong trait for a card to have. And I think Riptide is. I think very highly of it because of this. Even though some people may not really think it's usable in the deck. There's differing opinions, right? But I think it's important to know, like in this game, there are going to be cards like Unyielding Spirit. There's going to be very early game pressure from elusives with buffs, and cards like Will of Ionia, and more specific techs like Purify can just be incredibly powerful in certain scenarios. So having a flexible source of removal is really, really, really strong in this game, and something to look at when you deck build for sure.
When you said Riptide, I was thinking about Riptide Rex for some reason. I'm like, what is this guy talking about? Why is he playing Riptide Rex in deep, and how is that countering Unyielding Spirit? And halfway through, I'm like, okay, he's not. He hasn't lost it.
It's not yet. He's still got some sanity. All right, so do we move on to the final topic? We're going to be talking about the tournaments. Basically, we're going to talk about formats, organizers, the future of tournament play in Runeterra, the upcoming Twitch rivals, all that good stuff. So, yeah, let's talk about tournament formats first. This is an interesting subject because I both Swim and myself have competed in the Monokuma tournament, and I don't know about Swim, but I'm a big fan of the format held in those tournaments. The Conquest with ban. Sorry, I think fits Legends of Runeterra really well, and it leads to some very both fun and interesting ways to prepare for these sorts of tournaments. I think that was a great format that originated, I believe, in the Korean Invitational early on. But I've also seen some new formats rise, and they are also very interesting. I have no experience with a recent one, but I do want to hear you guys' opinion on it. There was a tournament recently. I don't remember what it was, like what tournament it was exactly, but they had a just main deck with a sideboard, 15-card sideboard, I believe. And yeah, what are you guys' thoughts about that format? And also like the Conquest, with ban, all that stuff.
Yeah, so overall, I completely agree with you. I really like the kind of like region, no overlapping region Conquest ban. I think the no overlapping region rule is really interesting.
Yes,
it leads
yes.
to like some crazy. It's like a puzzle crafting a lineup that all works together. You're like Noxus and Shadow Isles, that's good, and then Demacia and Ionia. But maybe I want to run Demacia and Shadow Isles, but then I need I need to free that up. It's feels,
super fun. It's great. Yeah,
right. It's great. It's challenging. I think it fits the game very well. Sideboarding is a concept that I feel like kind of requires a different style of game. I know there's a lot of people that like sideboarding, but overall it has a hard time working unless the game is designed for it, right?
More variance driven, like for example Magic, right, with lands and stuff. Like I think maybe
a bit more variance driven, but I think the biggest thing is just literally in the printing of cards you have to consider sideboarding. Like for example, in the sideboard tournament, most people were just running like Demacia or Ionia because those are kind of the best like sideboard colors, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's just most colors aren't really good to sideboard, right?
Yeah.
When you look at kind of like how they're designed and like what they offer, and it would have to be designed in a very different game to enable sideboarding to feel good. What do you think, Panda?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think Conquest is, like Swim said, you have to kind of solve the puzzle, and you can't just bring what you think is the top 3 decks. You have to bring the decks that you might sacrifice. Maybe the third deck is going to be a bit worse because you're allowing it to free up better regions for a different deck, for example. So I think that makes it really, really interesting. And also the fact that you can ban, like we said, there's a lot of binary stuff in Runeterra, and being able to ban kind of the binary counter to what you're trying to do is a big deal and a huge quality of life improvement to competing compared to ladder, for example, where you can play deep and then Ionia just destroys you any version with will. So it's nice being able to ban it. I think deep, for example, is a list that will excel a lot in tournaments and is not so great on ladder, especially in Masters, where people generally, maybe not now with burn, but overall may tend to play Ionia more because it's the region with the highest skill expression and the chance for a good player to really maximize his win rate and go for top 1 or whatever compared to other regions. So I think, especially at the higher end, Ionia might probably see more play in terms of general play rates compared to the rest of the ladder. So it feels bad playing deep on Masters, for example. But in tournament play, you kind of solve that issue with bans and with Conquest. And with the sideboarding stuff as well, I watched the tournaments this past weekend, and I don't plan on playing on the one a week from now because I think it's just not an interesting way to play competitive Runeterra because certain factions are very versatile, like Ionia, and it's almost a mistake not to bring it because you have so many, deny and will and all this stuff that in tournament play, and with a sideboard, it makes, there's no other faction I think that has versatility, and Demacia as well. So it's very one-dimensional in what you can do, I think, in tournaments. Maybe I'm wrong, but overall, I think certain factions like Noxus and certain other factions you'd never bring to a sideboard one deck tournament.
I'm glad we tackled this subject. I think it's very interesting. I really wanted to hear your guys' view on that. I wasn't sure. That's the impression that I got because when I saw the top performing list, I saw Demacia and Ionia. I wanted to believe there was more to that, but it makes complete sense that, like I said, I'm just a huge fan of the Conquest with ban. I think we all are. I think it's the best format right now. I can't really think of a better one. Especially, not only from a competitor's perspective, but also from a viewer's perspective, which is very important to note, because you can have a more competitive format, right? Like there's these really convoluted ones running around, but it wouldn't really be recommended for, from an entertainment standpoint, right? The fact that Conquest ban with region clause forces the diversity that it forces makes tournaments really watchable. You see some unique strategies, and it's overall great. So I think for now, most tournaments, I think should stick to that one, in my opinion.
And I'm not too sure how it's been because I haven't played in any tournaments yet for Runeterra, but generally, has it been like you queue a deck in Conquest, like without telling your opponent what you're queuing, obviously?
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically a ban, and then it's just you decide the ordering, like who goes first and who goes second, coin flip and all that, or rock, paper, scissors, which I'm absolutely horrendous at. Like, I lost like 90% of my rock, paper, scissors games. Like, I Jesus Christ, man. Like, it was tilting, actually. I was like, oh, man, like, I'm going, like, I'm not choosing any time. Like, boy, everybody's reading me, dude. It was so frustrating.
Dude, I love the rock, paper, scissors. That was great. That was honestly the most fun I had in Runeterra. Was just playing rock, paper, scissors.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the queuing element and deciding, what to play first and what you think your opponent's going to play in the mind games. And, I think Conquest and banning adds so much more to not just playing cards and playing your decks, but preparing for a tournament, deciding the lineup and everything. And I think no other format can come close to adding that extra, it's not just playing the cards and playing Runeterra, but also it's a whole different, game mode, for example, compared to ladder or anything else.
Very much so. And there's still going to be a lot of kind of MTG player comments that are going to be like, oh god, these idiots in Conquest. Like, there's a lot of people that I like sideboard in a game that's designed for it.
Yeah, like, I mean, in Magic the Gathering, they literally print so many cards for sideboard. Like, there's many sideboard cards, Aether Gust, Old Veil Summer, even though, there's certain stages of the meta in that game in which those cards have become actually present in main decks because certain colors being a little bit overtuned, right? But generally speaking, they keep that in mind when designing cards, and in Runeterra, that's just not the case.
Exactly.
And I'm definitely content with Conquest. I think that's the best one to watch, and the best one to play. I prepared for one Monokuma tournament. I had so much fun preparing. Like, I felt, I don't know, it's because you can focus on either building a really strong lineup or you can go targeting. I like targeting. I like going all in with that. I like seeing, predicting what people are going to bring, and that was just super fun to me. Like, I made a deck that wasn't really played, like the Thresh Lux deck, and it was just because of that tournament and that environment that came to be, right? Because it wasn't really a ladder deck. It's just a different environment, and it just goes to show that, the difference between ladder and tournament leads to more creativity, and I'm just a big fan of it. It's super fun, and it's great. Talking about organizers and future of tournament play in Runeterra, all that stuff. We've definitely seen many community tournaments come to be, more and more. We got Twitch Rivals coming in a few days from now. I'm not sure if they've tweaked up the format, because I really want to talk about this with you, Swim, because you'll be participating too, right?
Yeah.
I'm concerned. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very concerned with the format because it's very vague. Like they said.
Yeah, I messaged them about it in the chat that we should both be in. I think you should. Yeah, and I cleared it up. Basically, it's just standard format. The page itself was really ambiguous.
So what do you mean by standard format?
It's the normal Conquest, one ban.
Oh, really?
6 region. There's one very minor difference, which is that every deck must use 2 regions. So if someone wants to bring Bannerman, they will have to run like 1 second.
I mean, that's super minor though.
Super minor.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh, I'm so relieved, dude. Because I saw like 3 decks. It's like if you win with 1 deck, you can't play with it anymore. And then it was like this is matchup roulette, and I can literally bring the same deck with just like 1 card difference every time. Like I was just like, oh my god, what is this? Okay, I'm super happy to hear that. That's awesome. That's great.
It was a major concern of mine.
I'm gonna do some prep today though. After recording this, I'm gonna spend some time prepping today. Then, I'm excired. All right, cool.
Absolutely. You wanna prep together, man?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we can't compete in the same because you're NA and I'm European, right? Yeah. All right, dude. Let's prep together.
So
I mean, we can't.
That's how it works.
We can't queue. We actually literally can't queue each other right now. So
that's good because I think that's actually it's a relief to me because I think we're probably the only 2 players in the tournament that have logged more than like 20 hours in the game. So it's
Okay.
it's good that I can't queue into you.
Okay, good stuff.
I'm
All right,
having this discussion about a tournament that I can't participate in. It's a feels bad moment.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on.
No, I think it's an important topic to talk about, of course. But talking about organizers, not just about Twitch rivals, but also in general, because Riot, their stance is they want esports to come out organically with Runeterra. They're not going to push a certain circuit or a certain tournament format themselves. And looking at, there are a lot of organizers. There is a lot of kind of startup community kind of tournaments, but obviously the problem with these startup tournaments, they don't really have a prize pool. They don't really have incentive for it to grow and to become big thing. So I'm wondering, at what point do you guys think there would be a next step? Do you guys think Riot should or would get involved? Do you guys think naturally other third-party organizers might decide to step in and start hosting bigger, like maybe, for example, did with Artifact and Underlords, kind of these third-party organizers that can pump in some money when they think there is kind of a viewer base for it? And I think everyone can agree with Runeterra, with the launch and the marketing push and mobile launch and everything, there has been maybe it's tripled maybe the viewership overall or doubled.
Yeah, there's definitely been a huge surge. There's way more people watching. Yeah.
Do you guys think that this is going to be it's going to result in third-party organizers stepping in and kind of providing a bigger competitive format for Runeterra as well?
I want to tackle like the Riot component of it first, right? I think it's a matter of time. I do appreciate how Riot is more humble about it, though. Not to point any fingers, but there have been card games in the past where the first thing they did is announce the big tournament or whatever. And Riot, again, not trying to create any drama here.
I saw a few fingers pointing somewhere.
No drama, okay? But I like how Riot is just like, hey, we're gonna wait and we're gonna see if people are interested in this, and if they are, which I think people are, they'll get there. Like I'm actually very confident. I'm not, I always have my feet on the ground, right? But I'm very, very, very confident that Riot will eventually get some big tournaments running out. The specific nature of them, we've yet to see, because they could focus more on the entertainment aspect of it, or they could focus more on just pure, competitive, just have to, have qualifiers, or maybe a mixture of both, which I think would be ideal, personally. And I believe Runeterra has tremendous potential as a esports, like as a competitive tournament experience from like an entertainment perspective, right? I think it's a very fun game to watch at a competitive level, and it gets really intense, and it allows for heavy creativity, especially as we get more and more expansions. I would prefer for like an official Riot tournament to happen at least after one more expansion is introduced, personally. That's just my opinion, but I'm very excited for the future. I think it holds promise, and I would love to be a part of it, because even though my main focus for the game, personally, I mean, like, for example, Swim is a really good resource for, in case you guys don't know, like, he has his website with his metagame rankings and everything, so if you want to know exactly what people are playing and all that, he's a better resource for that. I like having fun with the game. I like building all sorts of different decks. I mean, he does too. I'm not saying he doesn't.
No. I like to have the least fun as possible. I play like elusive OTK, standalone.
I want to have the least fun. I play 100 games of Burn.
He's a full-blown degenerate, okay? But there is some good deep within him somewhere, and but yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like I like that, but I also like competing. I think it's very fun, especially in this game. I've competed in other card games, but I haven't found it as fulfilling as Runeterra, and I just really look forward to the future. I think it will develop. Like, a scene will surge. What do you guys think?
No, I agree. I would be. A lot of people have asked me, Swim, do you think there's gonna be some Riot official tournaments? And it's like, it's kind of not a matter of if, it's more of a matter of when, right? Like, yeah. I mean, they kind of have to. It's just whether it'll be, later this year or maybe early 2021, whenever they kind of want to start doing that kind of thing. I have heard, I don't know, like, to what degree this is true. I've just heard a couple of people mention that with Riot in particular, they have some, like, fairly firm, like, licensing rules. So it's harder for like third-party organizers, like major third-party organizers, to hold tournaments for them. I like, yeah, I don't know exactly to what degree that's true. It's just something I heard, but I think that's like part of the reason why there haven't been like larger organizations like We Play, for example, having done any Runeterra tournaments yet.
I think there's two things to talk about in that regard. One of them is that Valve overall generally is much more open to not being hands-on with their esports scene, with CS:GO, etc. And Riot is very hands-on, even with like regional leagues and qualifying leagues that feed into the major leagues in Europe and NA. There's always been Riot presence. Like if you look at the Spanish League of Legends league, it's run by a third-party organization, but Riot is very much involved, and the same with all the minor European countries that have like leagues that feed into the challenger leagues and the national LCS. I think Riot is very involved overall. But another thing to look at, and another kind of sneak peek into what might happen in the future, is TFT, because it's also a strategy game. It's run by Riot, and it has like a 6-month or so head start on Runeterra in terms of when it was launched, when it was officially launched and mobile, etc., and also when Riot started getting involved. And the general pattern for TFT has been invitationals at the beginning. There was like maybe 3 or 4 different, streamer invitationals. But after that, there hasn't been any there's been a few minor tournaments, but nothing huge, just online stuff mostly. And then they finally announced an actual Riot run tournament with qualifiers from ladder recently, and it will be happening like in June, so like a month from now, I think. And it has qualifiers from ladder to global tournament, so there's qualifiers like the top X from Europe, from NA, from Japan play qualify in their region, and then there's a 32-person tournament. I think it is different because they're 8-player lobbies for TFT. Of course, it's an auto chess game, but it might be a sneak peek into how Riot might, if that works out for them they might use it as kind of an experiment to then implement into Runeterra. So for the very competitive players that play Runeterra and look to go pro with Runeterra and maybe make it something they do in the future, keep track of the competitive scene in TFT, because it might answer some questions in that regard as well.
I agree.
Was that too long of a tangent? I mean,
no, man. Well, I wasn't trying to cool story, Bobby. I was just saying, like,
there's actually not much we can add there, exactly. That was pretty complete.
Too thorough, man.
I also completely agree with that, and I think we pretty much touched everything, right? Like that we wanted to touch today.
Unless you guys want to like talk about win rates briefly.
Oh for sure. Yeah, because you got access to the data. Yeah, just explain, because you got some sweet data there, and especially for newer players watching, like, what this is all about.
We can kind of like briefly just cover the kind of like, I would say 8 or so kind of like most played decks and their win rates. So we have 2 different metrics here, which is win rate in Masters and win rate in Normals, and these will have like a combined sample size in like the 5 figures. So it's pretty reliable at this point. It's like the most reliable resource we can have.
One thing to note really quick, I assume the data is all from Mobalytics deck trackers, so it's not, the sample isn't like the entire player base, it's more people running the specific deck tracker, which might be skewed towards, more accomplished, for sure. And better players that invest more time in, not casual players, basically.
Not casual players, exactly. That's good. I forgot to mention that. Thank you. But basically we have the stats coming in. They're actually pretty balanced. In the past, there have been a lot of decks that were 60% plus, but right now we just did like the new tier list on the site, and right now there's actually like tier 1 is mostly hovering around like 58% win rate, which is pretty good. It's like one of the more balanced meta we've seen. And basically the kind of like long story short here is that Burn and Bannerman, even though these are kind of like the 2 most complained about decks, don't actually have super high win rates. Burn is at 56 in Masters and 58 in Normals, or not Normals as in unranked, but just all ladder. Whereas Bannerman is 56% win rate in both categories. I actually think like partly in Burn, this is mostly to just being countered.
Yeah.
But for the case of Bannerman, I actually think that, I have a prediction. We'll see. I think that Lux Karma might actually start overtaking Bannerman as like the Demacia deck for next week.
I could totally see that. Like I've stated prior, I believe Lux is super overlooked. I think she's a fantastic. She has a great stat line, and there's a lot of cards. I love her personally with back to back, man. Like back to back with Lux is just amazing for me personally, and that's particularly a very powerful combo or a very powerful card against Bannerman. Bannerman hate like when you run a full set of back to back, it's just brutal for them.
Oh, yeah.
I would not, like, I could totally see that happening. I think the thing about Bannerman is it's a highly efficient vanilla deck, a mid-range list. It has a very strong curve, and it will always be a strong list, a reliable list. Especially, it's a very, very good deck that I recommend for beginners. It helps you learn the core aspects of the game, especially with unit-based strategies. But I also believe because of his linearity, English, I can't pronounce that. Because of his linearity, did I say it right? Well, anyways, as linear as it is, it's also very predictable, and it's also very counterable as well, especially with control builds. There are certain engines in the game that can just snowball, and Bannerman will always. There's certain points of their curve in which they hit the high gear, especially like turn 6 with Cithria and the likes, and of course the Bannerman play at turn 4. But they never go too crazy, right? Like the value and the tempo that they generate is kind of consistent throughout a match. And eventually they run out of gas, right? They don't have card draw. They don't really have anything like that. And decks that can just go play a little bit slower than them, but generate more and more value as the match goes on, can overwhelm them, and they are very disruptible to all this, which is why I'm not surprised at all to see that win rate, and I think it is still the strongest like mid-range deck in my opinion, and it can be a little bit oppressive in its current state versus some other mid-range decks, just because of how fast-paced, like their early game can be really, really fast. If they go Bird into War Chef especially with the Grizzled Ranger on turn 4, if they don't get the Bannerman, it can be pretty brutal. But it's definitely, not the king of the hill, and it is most certainly beatable by many different ways.
Also, outside of Masters, you have to factor in that some decks are just easier to play. Like, it's not an insult to people that play Bannerman or an insult to people that play aggro. It's just the way it is. There's less decisions to make. You just play things on curve, or you just go face. And I'm not saying aggro is very easy to play. I think it is a deck that you can master and become very good at and have a much better win rate than other burn players. Yeah. But overall, there's much less chance for decision-making and skill expression. So inherently, people, the easier deck is to play, the higher the average win rate will be at a lower bracket, skill bracket. Whereas in Masters, very good players will be able to get much higher possible win rates with decks with Karma-based decks and Heimer-based decks, in my opinion, at least. Yeah. So that's something to take into account as well. When you look at win rates, it's not just, this deck has a higher win rate, so it's much better. It might be that people playing Karma Lux in Silver have a 45% win rate because they're not playing it wrong. Whereas with Burn, it's harder to fall below a certain, win rate. It's easier.
Exactly. And you'll see that across like a lot of decks. A lot of decks you can kind of like cross-reference them, their win rates, and you'll notice there's a pattern with decks that are kind of like generally agreed to be trickier to play. Like for example, Heimer Vi right now is 60% in Masters and 55 in norm all ladder. Should I just say all ladder? That's a good way to say it. And then there's Ezreal Karma, which is 58% in Masters and 54 in all ladder. And of course, you've got Standalone OTK, one of the hardest decks to play in the entire game, 60% in Masters and then 54 in all ladder. Actually, like, no joke, guys. So Standalone OTK did get a lot harder this patch. Like, playing that deck, it feels there's a crazy amount of decision making compared to how it was before.
Because before it was kind of like, there was a bit of a meme about how because I rambled against that deck, especially when you brought it back for a while, and people were confusing my like my wording was saying how easy it was to play with the deck being bad, right? So, but now things have changed for sure. I still don't really think highly of the strategy by any means, but it's just not my cup of tea. But yeah, it's I can totally see that for sure, especially with it's just the tools that Ionia got in general, like just more combo utility, just deep meditation. Yeah, that's a card, and it just when you draw more cards in a game, you have more options, and also matchups got trickier as well now because they're more varied. So yeah, I can totally see that. And Karina is the one that we haven't really. Karina and Deep, there's not really a big difference in. It's funny. Deep people are, according to this data, Deep is more successful for lower ranks, right, than it is in higher ones.
Yeah, that's going to be largely due to like the meta, because slower strategies work a lot better at like lower ranks because they're just less punished.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not just that, but I think at Masters rank, there's, like I said before, I think there's a bigger possibility of players deciding to play Ionia-based decks because
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think if you're good and you want to climb, and then it gets countered by Deep, for example. So
that's the thing that's holding, like, that's the only thing that's really holding Nautilus back is Ionia, like Will of Ionia.
I'm looking forward to seeing Deep played in tournaments with bans. See how it can perform.
That's not bad. So yeah, statistically, Karina actually comes in with the highest overall win rate. It's 60 in Masters and 59 in all ladder. So if you're looking for a pretty good deck, honestly, all of these decks are pretty good. Karina happens to be one that I think it's pretty easy. A lot of people think aggro is easy and control is hard.
I love you point that out. Yeah.
Honestly, that can be true in a lot of cases. There's very easy control decks like Karina, and there's also some aggro decks.
Exactly. Like a lot of people just think, oh, control means, especially this may, be a bit of a bummer for those who were doing really well with Karina control and they think they are, some 400 IQ player out there. It turns out, control decks can be easy, and I would argue that Karina control is one of the easiest meta decks to play in the entire game.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, I that's why I don't know. I'm not a particularly fond of it but I cannot deny its efficiency, especially in a metagame with a high prevalence of Noxus, Piltover, Burn, right?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of its win rate right now. I think it feasts on Burn, and it has pretty good matches against everything else. So it generally has, and it's not really. I mean, it's not really weak to Ionia. I mean, sure. Will on Legends has little, doesn't do much, for example. Overall, I think it just has a lot of very good tools, and it's very versatile, and it has a very, very high win rate against Burn. So it's going to be a good win rate no matter what, I think, at that rate.
And I think now we have tackled everything. We got a good length too. We didn't.
Very good length.
Wow.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good length, Mogwai.
I'm just not talking anymore.
No, I just don't know.
It's like,
we went for a pretty long time, it's a long episode, but no, we have a very good length. Some of the ways you phrase things,
confidence, self-confidence is important. Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where we're gonna end this. Great segue there. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys thought. I really like this episode. I think we covered a lot of good stuff, and we surprisingly did not ramble for too long, which was one of my main concerns. Like I even was the one who said about switching. Like I'm gonna pat myself on the back about that one. So thank you guys so much for watching. Check out Swimstrim and ImpetuousPanda. ImpetuousPanda does stream 2 times a year, so make sure to not miss that. And Swim is obviously.
I'm gonna mention from June onwards, I will be moving. I have current problems with my internet, etc.
Yeah.
But from June onwards, I promise this time for real, I will actually start streaming and making some kind of content.
I don't believe you, but I will be looking.
Maybe July, but.
And of course, Swim, one of the biggest content creators in Legends of Runeterra. You guys can check him out. I know a good portion of those of you who watch me watch him as well, and vice versa. But regardless, I know there's a good chunk of you who don't, and I highly recommend. Good stuff, for some, like I mentioned before, he may be a little bit of a degenerate sometimes with certain decks, with his elusives and stuff. But
I can't help myself. I think it was something that happened.
Some bitches want to watch the world burn, man.
Yeah.
I just keep thinking of the Dark Knight when I look at some of your builds. He was known as the mad scientist in the Guantes.
Oh god.
Yeah, but good stuff, man. It's nice. It's nice to hang out with you guys again. We've known each other for quite some time, for years at this point. We've gone to many Gwent events in the past since we were casters and now analysts. Back in the day there. And it's nice to reunite with you guys, and I also see how we're all very passionate for this game, and we spend a lot of time into it. I really enjoyed this episode, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it as much as we, or at least I did, recording it. And yeah, subscribe, leave a like, all that good stuff. Leave a like, especially important for this, because it lets me know if this, you guys like this sort of content. I will be looking to upload this on Spotify as well. I'm looking into that, expanding on that, and it will be a reminder, a bi-weekly thing. Every 2 weeks, we will be uploading this. We'll be recording it on Monday, and we will be uploading it on Tuesdays for when the patch hits. And that is all I gotta say. So if you guys have any last words, go for it.
Just that I'm very glad we're all playing this game together.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same without you guys. It really wouldn't.
Oh, the feels.
There's probably a lot of viewers that don't have context, but I mean, we really just it's kind of crazy. We were joking before we started recording that here's another one. we've been kind of all like just kind of playing the same games together for years.
Yeah.
Like, there was that one month where we played Artifacts. But that was kind of the third one. But yeah,
we you said we all
oh yeah.
And Underlords for Soy and me, and obviously Gwent as well. So it's been a few
rides.
Some are dead, some are hanging on, but hopefully Runeterra will
which
be
one of those
very
are
successful.
which one of those
Runeterra's gonna be.
I'm not gonna point
great.
anything. Mogwai, I'm not gonna point any finger.
All right. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Thank you guys for being around. And this was fun. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.